Hello, my name is Adam, and welcome to the Political Awakening on the 7th of January, 2026. This is an analysis on the American action in Venezuela and the removal, abduction, and extraction of its President Maduro by American forces. Contrary to the official narrative, the American action was designed not to replace the regime, but only Maduro by another American client Vice President Melcy Rodriguez. The American extraction of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro could not have been undertaken without the support of the Venezuelan army and his political circle. This explains why the Venezuelan army did not move to protect Maduro. Instead, the exchange was left to Maduro's security detail, which was dominated by Cubans. The Americans could not have made such a move without having a plan to replace Maduro. This plan materialized through the swearing-in of his deputy, Melcy Rodriguez, and Trump's dismissal of the most popular opposition candidate, Maria Corina Machado, despite her pro-American orientation. Trump further refused to commit to a Democratic election timetable, while U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio went at length to explain what Trump meant by taking charge of Venezuela, clarifying that this did not imply direct control, but rather control by proxy, as had already been exercised under Maduro. Hence, despite Rodriguez's anti-American rhetoric, public displays of support for Maduro, and the subsequent clampdown and repressive measures, it is clear that these actions represent traditional demonstrations of anti-Americanism. Such displays are a political necessity for leaders across the American hemisphere in order to align with the prevailing anti-American sentiment among their populations. Trump further consolidated Rodriguez's internal credentials by publicly threatening her, projecting a false perception of her independence from the United States. Trump stated, "She had a long conversation with Marco, and she said, 'We'll do whatever you need.' I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice." The need to provide Rodriguez with this political mask stems from her long-standing cooperation with the United States and its oil interests in Venezuela, particularly through the U.S. oil company Chevron, with whom she has engaged for decades. Thus, Trump's claim that the U.S. and its companies would take charge of Venezuela's oil places Rodriguez in a position already aligned with advancing American interests. This was confirmed by reporting from the New York Times and Time magazine, which stated on the 5th of January, 2026. The Trump administration's decision to accept Rodriguez was made at the same time it decided that Maduro would be removed, according to people familiar with the matter who spoke to the New York Times. Soon after, Rodriguez was identified as a suitable but temporary replacement. The administration was reportedly convinced by intermediaries that Rodriguez was the viable choice, given Trump's interest in Venezuela's oil industry, which had been well managed by Rodriguez in her role as oil minister. With regard to Chevron, it was the only company awarded a license by the U.S. Treasury Department to operate in Venezuela, despite sanctions and overt hostility toward both Maduro and his predecessor, Hugo Chavez. In reality, Chevron had bankrolled Venezuelan regimes and facilitated American control over Venezuela even prior to recent events. In a statement initially sent to Newsweek but later retracted, Chevron stated, "With more than a century in Venezuela, we support a peaceful, lawful transition that promotes stability and economic recovery," adding, "We're prepared to work constructively with the U.S. government during this period, leveraging our experience and presence to strengthen U.S. energy security." It was also through Venezuelan oil that the Americans kept Cuba's economy functioning and its leadership supported without having to officially engage with the country, thereby maintaining the facade of Cuban independence. In reality, no country or regime has the power to challenge America in the Western Hemisphere, as all are maintained in a perpetual state of weakness, poverty, and instability. With regard to Cuba, Trump's portrayal of the regime as ready to fall because they got all of their income from the Venezuelan oil conceals the reality that the Cuban regime was indirectly supported by the United States through its allowance of Venezuelan oil supplies to Cuba. However, this supply later shifted to Mexico, which in 2025 became Cuba's largest oil supplier. The UK Financial Times on the 5th of January, 2026, confirmed that Venezuelan crude imports into Cuba have fallen and Mexico has emerged as the country's primary crude supplier. This shift was not a renegade action by Mexico, but one carried out with the tacit approval of the United States. By diverting oil supplies away from Venezuela to Mexico prior to the action against Maduro, the U.S. removed Cuba as an obstacle for the new Venezuelan regime, including the mercenaries and intelligence apparatus that had protected Maduro. This maneuver allowed the U.S. to officially engage with the new Venezuelan leadership while maintaining oil support for the Cuban regime through Mexico. Hence, to further conceal America's relationship with Cuba, Trump amplified the narrative of an impending Cuban regime collapse following the halt of Venezuelan oil supplies. This explains the internal dynamics of Venezuela, where America has merely reshuffled the political order in dramatic fashion, replacing one client regime with another that will continue to serve American control over Venezuela. We hope to bring you continued insightful analysis on global events in future broadcasts. You can also read our analysis on thepoliticalawakening.wordpress.com. Thank you for watching and listening. Goodbye.